Hi YouTube, this is Sabrina A. Fish, fantasy author, and I'm here today to give you a special treat. I am going to read the first chapter of my young adult fantasy novella in the Shine series called Lost Haven. The Shine series is a multi-author series created by William Bernhardt. He developed the world and then he invited 4 other fantasy authors to write in it. This is my first contribution, Lost Haven. I have 3 total. They all follow my character Camille and her adventures. This one is based in Southwest Oklahoma, since that's where I grew up. And the next one kind of travels through the U.S., Western U.S., and then the third one we take a trip to Russia, or Camille takes a trip to Russia. So anyway, this one's based in Southwest Oklahoma. It's my very first contribution, so I thought I would read chapter 1, give you a little teaser, a little taste, and I'm hoping that if you like it, you'll go visit on Amazon and buy either the ebook or the print copy. Either one's good for me. Just remember to review it after you're done. So without further ado, this is Camille's first adventure in the Shine series. Camille gasped in jagged breaths as she pushed through the crowd of laughing people. An angry male voice yelled her name. She moved faster. Loud music, bright flashing lights, and the smell of sweat and garbage swirled around her. Carnies called for her to try her luck to win one of the giant stuffed prizes hanging above their game stalls, but she ignored them to search for the corridor of food carts. She rounded the corner, encountering smells of sweet fried funnel cakes, sizzling turkey legs, and grilled sweet corn on the cob. Her stomach churned, the smells failing to entice like they normally would. She was supposed to meet her best friend Jenny at the sarsaparilla stand. Each September they enjoyed coming to Oklahoma State Fair. The first thing they always did was buy the little mini milk jugs of root beer. Knowing the stand was usually located at the center of the main corridor of food vendors, Camille searched for the correct way to run. Unsure, but knowing she needed to keep moving, she lunged to the right only to have 2 large, hairy arms wrap around her from behind. Her ex-boyfriend Gary spun her around and brought his mouth down on hers before she could call out for help. Holding her against his heavily muscled chest, Gary pulled her into the shadows as a group of teenage males whistled and called for them to get a room. His large hand held her head still, while his other arm pinned her arms to her sides. She kicked at his shins, but he forced his tongue into her mouth. Realizing she would tire long before he would, she went limp. He groaned in triumph. Ignoring the bile threatening to come up, she bit down on his tongue as hard as she could while bringing her knee up into his crotch. He jerked his head back, releasing her as he cried out and crumpled to the ground. She glared at him. "It's over, Gary. Touch me again and I'll file a VPO against your ass." She backed out of the shadows into the crowded, brightly lit avenue between the food carts. He straightened to his full 6 feet 1 inch height and smiled at her. The cold possessiveness in his pale blue eyes raked over her body. She shivered. Had she ever found that possessiveness attractive? They'd dated for a year until her parents' death 6 months ago. With her parents no longer in the picture, he'd stopped pretending to be the kind, considerate man she'd been attracted to. He'd begun to use her grief against her, undermining her confidence in herself, until she believed she was nothing without him. Then he'd put his hands on her. She'd actually believed him when he'd said it was her fault. If Jenny hadn't stepped in, she'd have married and given him total control of her life. She shuddered. She'd been so naive. Gary followed her into the lighted corridor. "No one will believe you. You belong to me, Camille. There's nowhere you can go. If you try to run, I'll find you." She squeezed her shaking hands into fists. Her breath rushed in and out of her lungs as the truth of his words threatened to choke her. Pressure tightened in her chest. She stepped back as he moved closer. People gave them wary glances, sensing the thick tension between them. "No! I belong only to myself. We're done. Leave me alone." "Why do you fight the inevitable? You know I'll care for you better than you ever could. You'll have everything you could ever want." He held his hand out to her. "Come, Camille, stop being ridiculous. Let me take you home, where you belong." Her parents hadn't been happy when they'd first started dating. Her father had been sure that the ulterior motives were involved. But after a year of his perfect courting of their daughter, even her father changed his mind. Her parents had been so happy when they announced they'd be getting married. They thought Gary made her happy. He'd been everything they wanted in a son-in-law. Yes, he hit her once, but hadn't she brought it on herself? Hadn't she pushed him to it with her accusations? She'd found the papers demanding her father sell their land to Gary's grandfather. Suddenly, Gary's mindless pursuit of her had seemed like a means to an end. She'd been sure he didn't want her for herself, but for the land his family coveted. She'd thrown the papers in his face. She'd screamed that he was nothing but a whore selling his body for her family's land. And he'd backhanded her so hard the entire right side of her face became a large, ugly bruise. She looked at his outstretched hand, then up to his cold blue gaze. She remembered the pain of his hand, the cruelty in his face when she'd accused him of whoring himself. He hadn't denied it. Straightening her shoulders, she backed away. His eyebrows lowered. A hand touched her shoulder, offering support. Camille met Jenny's steady gaze. Her friend squeezed her shoulder. Camille stepped back, taking Jenny's hand in hers. She lifted her chin and met Gary's icy glare. "It's over. I will never let you back in my life. Your threats are nothing but the hot air of a pathetic man who can't accept rejection." She pulled Jenny until they stood on the opposite side of the wide corridor of food carts. His brows lowered, further as something dangerous moved through his eyes. The hairs on her arms stood up. Her head pulsed at the base of her skull. Clenching Jenny's hand, she pulled her friend backwards to get further away from him. "I wish I'd never met you, Gary Walker. I wish you couldn't see me, that you were blind. I wish your cold blue eyes could never again touch me with their cruelty. I hate you." His face darkened as his chest heaved with his anger. His eyes stayed focused on her. Jenny pulled on her arm. "Come on, Camille. He can't do anything to us. Let's go enjoy the fair." When Jenny pulled her away, Gary exploded toward them. The crowd between them cleared as people stumbled out of the way. Camille froze. But before Gary could take more than a step, he cried out, collapsed to his knees, and clutched at his head. Jenny pulled Camille's arm, but she couldn't move. He seemed to be in real pain. A man standing near Gary knelt down and put his hand on Gary's back. "Sir, do you need help?" Gary groaned and squinted at the man. His eyes widened, and he grabbed the other man's arm. "My head! It feels like someone took a pickaxe to it. I can't see anything." The man pulled out a cell phone and dialed. "Yes, this is Dr. Marsh. I need an ambulance for a possible aneurysm at the fairgrounds." Gary turned his unfocused gaze toward her. "She did this to me." The air left Camille's chest in a rush. Clenching her friend's arm, she struggled to force air into her lungs. He was right. She had done it. She'd blinded Gary with her shine. Okay, so that's chapter 1. As you can see, Camille is dealing with a lot more than just being a shine, but the shine definitely plays a huge part. So anyway, I'm hoping that you'll read Lost Haven. You can find it on Amazon in ebook or print form. So I'm hoping that you enjoyed what you read, you want to read more, and that you'll check it out. And don't forget to leave a review. Thank you.